All right, let's go ahead and get started. Did everybody have a good break? An extra long Thanksgiving break? Yes? No? Now, I don't know if it's a good thing or not when I walk up here and you're giving your judgment of my teaching, and I just feel all the negative vibes coming out of the door. I don't know. Is that a good thing or not? I don't. Maybe it's coming from another classroom. I hope. Okay. But we got that out of the way. We have your bonus test material to cover today and Thursday. Thursday we can review for the final and the bonus exam, and you're almost finished with this. Okay, so hang in there, finish strong, and you'll be done with Finance 330. Now, if any of you happen to be interested, we just found out this today, we just got our summer schedule today, but if anybody is needing to take Finance 332, which is kind of the second part of this course, I will be teaching that course the first summer session. It will be taught via ITV. It's a 5-week class. It's a night class on Monday and Wednesday nights. But the way I teach it, I did it last summer too. I tried it last summer. It's kind of a hybrid format. So what that means is I'm downstairs in the ITV room, and they're video recording my lectures each night. But the tests and the quizzes and the lectures I post online. So actually, you physically don't even have to come to class if you don't want to take that class. As a matter of fact, last semester I had several students who were out of the country who be teaching a section of Finance 330 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Finance 332 on Mondays and Wednesdays. They're both taught the same way. So it means you take it kind of like an online course, but you don't have to pay for an online class. If you want to come to class in Murray or in Paducah or Hopkinsville or wherever else it's beaming out to, that's fine. You can do that too. So it fits. If you're an in-person learner, that's fine. It works for that. If you like online classes, it works for that too. So just whatever. So again, that'll be the first summer session. And if anybody has questions about that, you can talk to me after class, and I'll be happy to help you with that. What else? I sent out a couple of, one job announcement yesterday with CFSB. They're looking for 8 people for a new department. It was kind of a mystery thing. They didn't really tell me much more. I can find out more information about it if you would like me to. But if anybody's interested, I would suggest getting your resume and application in as soon as you can, and feel free to use me as a reference if you would like to for applying for that position. So what else do we have to talk about? What other questions? Or they are 2 different exams. Yes, on next Tuesday, the Tuesday of finals week at 1:30, this is when your test will be in here. You're going to have 2 tests that day. So you will have the regular final exam, which is 50 questions. And then once you take that, you will turn it in to me. I will give you your bonus test, which has 15 questions. They count 1 point each. Any of those that you get correct are points added to your final exam score. So if you get 8 out of the 15 correct, you get 8 points added to your final exam test grade. Let me make this clear. Those aren't points added to your final average. Sometimes students get that mixed up, and they say, I made a 10 on my bonus test, and I had an 80 average in class, so that should mean my average is now a 90. No, that's not how it works. So I'm pretty generous, but I'm not quite that. I just can't be that generous, okay? So it's points added to your final exam test score. And again, it should be pretty straightforward. Once we review for it, once you look at the study guide, I think it'll be pretty straightforward. If you're taking the online class, it's the same thing. You have 2 separate tests, the regular final and then the bonus exam. By the way, let's see. Okay, I guess there's just one question here. Those of you who attended the financial seminar, and you signed this sheet, I could read most of your names. There was one person who I couldn't find in either of my classes, and there's another one who gave me their initials, and I really couldn't tell who that was. But other than that, I could pretty much read it. So I'm going to pass this around if you would. You'll see a little mark out beside the names. If this is you, or if you attended under another name or something for some reason, let me know so that I can give you proper credit for attending. Okay, but there's just one person here. It's the number 4 and number 7. I just wasn't really sure about. So if you take a look at that, you can help me out with this. Same day. Tuesday at 1:30. Yeah, Tuesday at finals week at 1:30. You will have 2 hours to take both tests. That'll be more than enough time. No, it'll be over it'll be over what we're going to start today, which is slides 7 through 30 of chapter 10, and then 2 slides, I think, of chapter 12. That's it. Easy stuff. Okay, now if you remember on the final exam, I said you're going to have the first 6 slides from chapter 10. So we've already talked about slides 1 through 6 from the capital budgeting techniques chapter. And that was basically a lot of terms. So we went through, what is capital budgeting? What is a capital expenditure? The capital budgeting process, different types of projects. And I said this will become more important when we get into the calculations, independent versus mutually exclusive, and then different ways to kind of parcel out the funds that you have for capital budgeting projects. And then how do you decide? So different approaches. So this is where we're going to pick up slide 7 with the information for the bonus tests. Now, let me just it's been a while since we've been here, so let me kind of refresh your memory on this. Remember, when we're talking about capital budgeting, we're talking about a corporation investing a lot of money in a project. And a project is just a generic term that covers a building, a warehouse, a tractor, introducing a new product line, increasing research and development. It's just whatever they're investing in. I just call it a project, okay? So that's just a very generic term. This project is expected to produce benefits or cash inflows for multiple time periods. So 2 years, 6 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it might be. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to look at, based on spending the money and based on our estimates of the cash flows coming in, is it a good project or is it not a good project? And we're going to talk about some different techniques for calculating this. Now, what we have here, this is going to be the company and the projects that we use through all of our different calculations. We've got a company here, Bennett Company. They're a metal fabrication company. They're looking at 2 projects. Project A is going to cost $42,000. That's the initial investment. Project B is going to cost $45,000. And then, based on what they spend, now remember, the initial investments, these are negative cash flows. So this is what they look like. So for Project A, we're going to spend $42,000 today, time period 0, and then it's expected to bring in for us over the next 5 years $14,000 each year. Project B is going to cost $45,000. It's going to bring in $28,000 positive the first year, $12,000 the second year, and then $10,000 in years 3, 4, and 5. So these are going to be what we're working with throughout the entire chapter. And this is just a timeline of what it would look like. So this is the same thing. Again, Project A and Project B. Okay, so now we're going to look at some different methods. The first method is the easiest. It's called the payback method. And as the name implies, the payback method simply determines how long does it take the project to pay back the initial investment. And the solution is given in terms of years. So 2 years, 3 years, 4.5 years, whatever the situation may be. And a couple of things about the decision criteria. One is the company is going to determine what is the maximum acceptable payback period. And all companies are different. So, one company may say a project has to pay for itself within 5 years. Another company may say that a project has to pay for itself within 3 years. And again, there's really no right or wrong. It's just whatever the company puts in place. And if the payback period is faster than the maximum acceptable period, we accept the project. And I guess we could say if it's equal to or less than the maximum acceptable, we would accept it. And if it's greater than the maximum period, we would reject the project. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, nothing really complicated about this. This is the payback period formula. This will be given to you on your formula sheet for the final exam and for the bonus test. You probably don't need this. Once you work a couple of these examples, you're good to go, okay? What it says is the payback period is equal to the year before full recovery plus any unrecovered costs at the start of the next year divided by the total cash flow during that next year. And again, this is going to give us our solution in terms of years. So with our two projects, Project A and Project B, we can take a look at calculating this. Now, this kind of walks you through each of those, okay, for Project A. So let's go back here. We're just going to do this in a much easier way. Okay, let's go back and look at the cash flows. What we're doing here is we're trying to recover with Project A $42,000. So what you do is you simply start adding up the cash inflows. The first year, we recover $14,000 of the $42,000. So it hasn't paid for itself yet. The second year, we recover an additional $14,000. So now we're at 14 plus 14, which is $28,000. We're still not there. And then the third year, we recover an additional $14,000. So now 28,000 plus 14,000 just happens to equal the initial investment of 42,000, which it often does in the textbook. It's nice and neat. So we can say that the payback period for Project A is 3 years exactly. Does everybody see how we're doing that? Nothing really complicated, just how long does it take to pay back? Now, Project B is a little different. With Project B, we start adding up the cash flows. So we're trying to recover, in this case, $45,000. The first year, we recover $28,000. The second year, we recover an additional $12,000. So now we're at 28 plus 12, which is 40. We can see that the year before full recovery, in following our formula, is year before full recovery is year 2. Now we have to add to that any unrecovered costs at the start of the year. So after the second year, how much do we still have to pay back for Project B? How much is left? We're at 40, we need 45, we still have 5,000 left, so that's the unrecovered cost at the start of the year, divided by what's the total cash flow during year 3? 10,000. So the payback period would be 2 plus 5,000 divided by 10,000, which is 2.5 or 2.5 years. So Project B pays for itself in 2.5 years, which is what it's telling us here. So this walks you through A and B, the calculations. So Project A pays for itself in 3 years, Project B pays for itself in 2.5 years. Now, this is where I've talked about it's important to know whether projects are independent or mutually exclusive. Remember, we said if independent projects, they don't have anything else to do with each other. So you can accept as many as meet your minimum criteria. Mutually exclusive projects do the same thing. So even if both meet your criteria, you're only going to choose one. So let's say in this example, this company has a minimum, or a maximum, acceptable payback period of 2.5 years. And these are mutually exclusive projects. Which one of these projects would you choose? Maximum 2.5 years, and they're mutually exclusive. Project A, Project B, or both Project A and Project B, or neither Project A or Project B. Okay, you're still in a turkey fog, okay? The tryptophan is still in your system. I understand that. This is not a hard question. You can choose how many with mutually exclusive projects. 1. How many of those meet the maximum 2.5 year payback period? Only one. Project B pays for 2.5 years. Project A takes 3 years. Project A doesn't even qualify anyway because it takes longer to pay back than the company accepts. So we can only choose Project B. What if they're independent projects? Which one or which ones would you choose? Remember, the maximum acceptable payback period is 2.5 years. So even if they're independent project where you could choose both, if they met their minimum criteria, only one meets the minimum criteria of 2.5 years, so you're just going to choose B. Now, if we change it to a maximum acceptable payback period of 3 years, and they're independent projects, which one or which ones would we accept? In this case, we would accept both. What about the mutually exclusive projects? Which one or which ones would we accept? You would choose the one that pays back the fastest because you can only choose one, which is Project B. So again, it makes a difference whether we're talking about independent or mutually exclusive projects. So as you're reading through some of the practice questions, pay attention to that because it makes a big difference as to which of these answers would be correct. So is everybody okay with the payback period? Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Yes. Do you ever wonder why they make you come back for a week of classes after Thanksgiving? Why don't we just start 2 weeks earlier in the summer and finish at Thanksgiving? And we're done. Wouldn't that make more sense? This has nothing to do with the lecture. I can see it in your eyes, and I'm kind of the same way of, okay, I've got to come back for 2 weeks. The food settles in, you've been home, you're finished. Yeah, you're done. The break was just long enough to piss you off. That's what it was, okay? Now I've got to come back.
They could have at least given us the full 7 days, you know what I'm saying?
That's true. I did. I did give you the full 7 days.
You did. I appreciate that.
That's right. Okay. I hope that shows up in my evaluations. Okay. Okay. All right. So payback period, pretty straightforward. This talks about it. I skipped that really quickly. The pros and cons of the payback period. Essentially, what this says is the biggest benefit of the payback period is really easy. I mean, you don't have to be a finance major or an accounting major to understand the payback period. I mean, it's just really straightforward. Some of the drawbacks, and again, I want you to read this on your own, but some of the drawbacks, one is it doesn't include time value of money, and you should know by the amount of time we spend on Chapter 5 in this class, time value of money enters into almost everything in finance, and it's not in the payback period. Also, notice the payback period doesn't consider any cash flows past the payback period. So there could be some really big cash flows that occur after the project pays for itself that we don't even consider because we just add up the cash flows to the payback period and then we stop. So those are the weaknesses. Now, the next method is what's called the net present value, the NPV. This is a little more technical. You're actually going to use your financial calculator for this, okay? So if you have your financial calculator, get it out. If anybody needs to borrow one, I've got a couple here. If you don't have yours with you, anybody need to borrow one? Anybody else? Any takers? What? Okay, now let me explain what the net present value is telling you. This is the formula, okay? We're not going to use the formula. You can do this by hand if you have to, but your financial calculator makes it a lot simpler. Actually, we've already done this in Chapter 5. We just didn't call it net present value. What this says is the net present value is equal to the sum of the discounted cash flows, or the present value of the future cash flows, that's what this is, minus the initial investment, the cash flow at time period 0. So what this is saying is if we can discount these future cash flows that we see here, if we can discount these $14,000 cash flows, take the present value of each of them back to time period 0, subtract the initial investment, and we still have a positive net present value, it's a good project. Even if it has a 0 net present value, it's a good project. If it has a negative net present value, then it is not an acceptable project. So that's what we're looking for, dollar values. 0 or positive, good, negative, bad. Because what that means is the net present value is how much we either increase or decrease stockholder wealth if we accept this project. So if it's a positive NPV, we're increasing stockholder wealth by that amount. If it's a negative net present value, we're destroying that much in stockholder wealth. And we said day 1 in here, the ultimate goal of a financial manager should be to increase or maximize stockholder wealth. So based on this, present value of the cash flows, cash inflows minus initial investment, these are our decision criteria. Okay, so if the NPV is greater than or equal to 0, we accept it. If it's less than 0, we reject the project. And to calculate the net present value, we can bring up our financial calculator. Now, what you're going to want to do is, and we've done this before, but we're going to use our cash flow register, the CF key. So if you press your CF key, you may have something there, you may not, but you want to now press your second and your clear work key in the bottom left-hand corner to clear out any old cash flows. We used this in Chapter 5 when we were calculating the present value of a mixed stream of cash flows. So if you remember back to Chapter 5, at time period 0, we never had a cash flow. So we always simply pressed our down arrow to go to cash flow number 1, and then we started entering our cash flows. Here we actually do have a cash flow, and it's going to be a negative dollar amount. It's the initial investment. So for Project A, the initial investment is going to be $42,000. We're going to make it negative here with the plus minus key, the bottom row of keys. And then we're going to press the enter key to lock it in. If you don't press the enter key, it's going to go back to 0. So if you get some really strange answers, you might want to check your cash flow. Now, if we press our down arrow key one time, and again, you can move around it within this function. That's what our arrow keys tell us, these up and down arrow keys. We're going to enter the cash flow at time period 1, which is $14,000. Positive, so we don't have to worry about anything. We're going to press the enter key to lock it in. Now, if you press the down arrow key, it says the frequency of cash flow number 1. How many times in a row does cash flow number 1 occur? Well, if you take a look at the timeline, the $14,000 occurs 5 times in a row. So we can do this one of 2 ways. At this point, we could put in a frequency of 5, press the enter key, and be done with our cash flows. Okay, that's the quick way. Or we could simply leave this set to 1, arrow down to cash flow 2, put in 14,000, go down to cash flow 3, 14,000, and then the same thing for 4 and 5. I'm going to do it the fast way, okay? So I'm just going to put in 5, press the enter key. Now I can use my down arrow key to take a look at my cash flows to make sure they're all there. So the negative 42,000, the positive 14,000, which occurs 5 times. The next step is to press your NPV, the net present value key, and notice it matches what we're doing here, net present value. Now it asks for a discount rate or a cost of capital. In this case, I think in our example, it's 10%. So we're going to put in 10 as a whole number and press the enter key to lock it in. Then we're going to press the down arrow key 1 time, and it tells you at the top of the screen, press your compute key in the top left-hand corner to come up with a solution. So this tells us that if we spend $42,000 on Project A, and it does in fact bring in $14,000 per year as inflows, after discounting this at a 10% cost of raising that $42,000, we're still going to have $11,071 left over from this project. Okay, that's a positive number, a positive NPV. So this would be an acceptable project. Because if we undertake it, we're going to increase stockholder wealth by $11,071. So did everybody come up with the right number? From the book, yeah, that would be the F01, would be 5. I think that's kind of a generic thing from the book, that slide, and so that kind of fits several calculators, but it's not correct for any of them, so you're exactly right. So put in F01 equals 5. And what she's talking about, if you take a look at the slides, you'll see this. Let me go ahead and move ahead to it. You will see this slide. And so she's talking about here where it says the N is 5. So this is the negative cash flow at time period 0. This is your cash flow at time period 1. This should say the F01, the frequency of cash flow 1, should be 5. They just have the letter N here. That's a really good question. Why don't we work through that one, and I'll show you what we do. Okay, so what she's saying here is, okay, we've got the cash inflows here, but now what do we do down here at time period 3? So let me show you here. We'll work through this. All right, so we're going back to our calculator. I'm going to press my clear button. I'll press the CF key. Now I'm going to press the second and clear work button to get rid of the old cash flows from Project A. Now for Project B, notice the initial investment is $45,000 negative, so we'll put that in, $45,000. We're going to make it negative, and then press the enter key. Now press your down arrow key. The first cash flow is $28,000. That's positive, so we can just press our enter key. Press the down arrow key again. The frequency it defaults to 1. That's correct. It only occurs 1 time in a row, so we're going to press our down arrow key again. Cash flow number 2 is $12,000. And again, you have to press the enter key after each one, or it's going to go back to 0. Down arrow is 1, so that's correct for the frequency. Now we're at cash flow number 3, which is $10,000. And press the enter key. Now, at this point, again, you have a couple of options, because notice the $10,000 occurs 3 times in a row for periods 3, 4, and 5. So one solution, if I press my down arrow key, is I can simply put in a frequency of 3 and be finished. Or I can simply down arrow to time period 4 and put in 10,000, and then time period 5, put in 10,000. This time, I'll go ahead and do it the long way, okay? So instead of putting in, you can just put in 3 here. But instead of doing that, I'm just going to leave it set to 1. I'm going to go to cash flow 4 and put in 10,000, press the enter key, and then cash flow 5 and put in 10,000 and press the enter key. You'll get the same answer no matter which way you do it. Okay, so the cash flows are in. Now I want to press my NPV key, net present value. Enter the discount rate, which again I think is 10%. Enter. And then the down arrow key and compute. And this tells us that the net present value for project B is a positive $10,924.40 after rounding. So again, a positive net present value, it's a good project. Now, the way we read this is, if we can only choose one, we choose the one with the highest net present value because it's the one that increases stockholder wealth the most. So this would be project, in this example, it would be project A. So if you're reading a problem, you've got these two projects that you've calculated the NPV for, and it asks if these are independent projects, which one or which ones would you accept? Project A, Project B, both, or neither of them. If they're independent projects based on just the net present value. How many can you choose if they're independent? You can choose as many as meet your minimum criteria. So that means if the NPV is 0 or positive, it's a good project. So if these are independent projects, we would choose both. If they're mutually exclusive projects, which one would we choose? Just A. Because we're going to choose one. Both of them meet the minimum criteria, but we're going to choose the one with the highest net present value, which is project A. So everybody follow me on this? Pretty straightforward. Eyes rolling in the back of his head. I can see it. He's hurting. He's struggling, but stay awake, okay? Do you think when we're up here teaching, we don't see your eye, and when I see the whites of your eyes and that's all I can see, yeah, I know you're tired, okay? I can tell. I've been doing this a little while, so I can watch your eyes and lecture at the same time. All right. Now, this basically just says that if you like using Excel, they have some really good capital budgeting technique software already built in. So you can put the information in, calculate the net present value, works really well, pretty quick. All right, another technique, let's see, where are we here? Okay, so let's go over this last one. Another technique is the profitability index. And this basically is just another way of looking at the net present value. So it says the profitability index is the present value of the future cash flows divided by the initial investment. So instead of subtracting one from the other, we're simply now doing division. And what this tells us is if the present value of the cash flows divided by the initial investment is greater than or equal to 1, we accept the project. If it's less than 1, then we reject the project. And actually that takes me back to one point I want to make before we actually go through this calculation. When we were talking about net present value, and I said if you have a net present value of 0, that's an acceptable project. Somebody explain to me, why would a company accept a project that has a net present value of $0? You're not losing anything. Okay. That's exactly right. Because if you have a 0 net, think of that as a break-even project. You're not really increasing stockholder wealth, but you're not decreasing stockholder wealth. Now, let me give you an example of this. If, let's say you've got a construction company and your area is going through a pretty bad time economically, people just aren't building much. And so for a construction company, you've got workers, you've got equipment, and you have maybe some buildings or warehouses that need to be working. Now, you've got two options. Let's say that you put out some bids for projects and you do some analysis and you find that you're looking at a zero net present value project. Why would you undertake that? Well, the reason is if you decide not to, you may have to start laying off workers. And if you lay off your workforce or part of your workforce, and then 3 or 4 years later when things get better, you call them to ask them to come back, they found other jobs. Okay? Most of them are not going to come back. Also, if you've got equipment, if you've got tools, if you have buildings, the worst thing for those items is to sit still, not be used. Equipment starts to break down when it's not used, when it's not maintained. Buildings, if you have buildings that aren't being used, you have water leaks, you have electrical problems, you have all kinds of things that can happen to your buildings if they're not being used. And so if you accept that zero net present value project, you're not getting rich, but you're maintaining your company until things get better. Now, don't kid yourself. You can't make a living as a corporation on zero net present value projects, but you eventually have to have positive net present value projects. But you can accept some zero NPV projects occasionally just to keep from losing money or just to keep your company afloat until things get better. Does that make sense? Kind of why we would accept a zero net present value project? Yes? All right. Now, for the profitability index, we're going to use the same number. So notice, if we calculate the present value of the cash inflows for project A, it's going to be this, $53,071. So if in the net present value, so if we calculate the present value of these future cash flows, the $14,000 for 5 years, at a 10% discount rate, it equals $53,071. The initial investment has a present value of $42,000 because that's what we're spending today, so we don't have to worry about discounting that. So going with the profitability index, which is here, we're simply going to take the $53,071 divided by the $42,000, which equals a PI, profitability index, of 1.26. For project B, it's 1.24. So again, both of these are 1 or greater, which is good. If they're mutually exclusive projects, we're going to choose the one with the highest profitability index, which is project A. If they're independent, we would accept both projects because they're both greater than 1. So it's just another way of looking at the net present value. All right. And then the last part of this, the internal rate of return. And again, this is pretty simple because if you have a financial calculator and you've entered your cash flows for net present value, you press one additional button and you get your internal rate of return. It's simple. Now, if you're doing this by hand, it can be pretty complicated. It can take a while because what you're doing is you're looking for the discount rate that causes the net present value to equal 0. That's what the internal rate of return is. It's the discount rate that causes the net present value of a project to equal 0. So the way we use this is if the internal rate of return is greater than or equal to the cost of raising the money, the cost of capital, we would accept the project. If the internal rate of return on a project is less than the cost of capital, we reject the project. Again, pretty straightforward. And in using your financial calculator, so let me go back to, okay, so let's say we're here, okay? This is where I finished with the NPV for project B. Most of your practice problems and practice questions, the one at the end of the chapter, the ones that are on Canvas, typically they're going to ask you to calculate net present value and internal rate of return. So let me show you how easy this is if you already have your cash flows in. Now notice, if I press my CF key, my cash flows for project B are already there. The 45,000, the 28,000, the 12, 10, 10, and 10. They're all there. To calculate the internal rate of return, so let's say I just calculated NPV. Okay, I'm there. For internal rate of return, we're going to press the IRR button, internal rate of return. And we're simply going to press the compute key in the top left-hand corner, because the cash flows are already there. Now, if we didn't have the cash flows there and we just wanted internal rate of return, we would put the cash flows in, and then we would simply press the internal rate of return key and compute. And that's all there is to it. So what we're doing is, now this says the internal rate of return is 21.65%. We compare that to, that's the internal rate of return, we compare that to the 10% cost of capital for project A. The 21% is higher than the 10%, so this would be an acceptable project. Well, this was project B, actually. And then for project A, if we wanted to do the same thing, we could go to our cash flows. I'm just going to do this really quickly. 42,000 negative, time period 0, cash flow 1, 14,000, enter, down arrow, frequency of 5, enter. My cash flows are now in. If I press the internal rate of return key and the compute key, I find that the internal rate of return for project A is 19.86%, which again is higher than the cost of capital of 10%. So this would be a good project. If I could only choose one, I'm going to choose the one with the highest internal rate of return. So in this case, that would be project B at a 21 point something percent internal rate of return. So if I go down to this, because this is our calculation, let's see, okay, so here we are. So what you'd find is this for A, this for B, and you'll notice that when we're looking at this, there's a difference between the best project according to the net present value and the best project according to the internal rate of return. One says project A is better, the other says project B is better. And we get into, this is the Excel, and we get into that here, which we will finish up and talk more about on Thursday, in addition to reviewing for the final exam and the bonus test. So that's all I have for you today. You have survived your first day back from Thanksgiving break. On Thursday, we will finish up chapter 10 and just a couple slides from chapter 12. Also, we will review for your final exam, which is Tuesday next week at 1:30. So everybody have a great day. I will see you on Thursday.